Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Morristown area and the Morris County branch of the NAACP, I'm pleased to welcome you to our Candidates Forum for Chatham Township Committee. I'm Donna Gariglia. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Morristown area. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Empowering voters, defending democracy is our message. Elections and voting are core concerns for the League. We are committed to providing fact-based information about issues and positions candidates take on those issues to help voters make their own decisions and participate in our electoral process. We envision a democracy where everyone has the right, the knowledge, the confidence, and the opportunity to participate. The League of Women Voters never supports or opposes candidates for office or political parties. Any use of the League name or footage from this debate in campaign materials or advertising of any kind, including internet, social media, cable, and television, is not authorized by the League of Women Voters. Membership in the League is open to people 16 years of age and older of all gender identities. With 100 years of experience, the League is one of America's oldest and most trusted civic nonprofit organizations. Partnering with the League in presenting this forum, we welcome the Morris County branch of the NAACP. We are grateful for their nonpartisan participation and support and look forward to continue working with them. I'd like to introduce their president, Vanessa Brown.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, League of Women Voters of Morristown, for inviting us to partner with you as we have done in the past. And congratulations to all you candidates who are participating in this debate tonight. My name is Vanessa Brown, and I am the president of the Morris County branch of the NAACP, and I'm also the third vice president for the New Jersey State Conference of the NAACP. We have over 2 million members across the country and throughout this nation. We were formed in 1909. And primarily, we formed because of the lynching that was taking place during that time. So there were a lot of African Americans, W.E. Du Bois, and a lot of white abolitionists who were sick and tired of this. So they gathered and we formed the oldest, boldest, and the baddest civil rights organization in 1909. And our vision is to ensure a society in which all individuals have equal rights and is no racial hatred or discrimination through the democratic process. So we too do voters registration and things of that nature and want to participate more in the candidate selection and participation. We have participated on this debate and the one with the borough. So we're looking forward to the Chatham Township debate tonight. You're welcome to become members of the NAACP. You can go to naacp.org. There are various levels of participation in the organization. It's throughout the country, as I mentioned. We have youth groups, we have college chapters, and we have adult branches. For adults, the memberships are $30 annually. Again, just go to naacp.org, put in your town, and then you'll have access to us. So enjoy the evening, and we look forward to a wonderful debate. Thank you for your participation. And again, thank you, League of Women Voters, for inviting us to participate and partner.
Thank you, Vanessa. We encourage everyone to go to vote411.org, a one-stop site for information on all aspects of voting in New Jersey, with information about all candidates up and down the ballot. And please visit our website, LWVMorrisArea.org, and the New Jersey League website, LWVNJ.org, which addresses the latest of all voting concerns. All forums conducted by New Jersey Leagues can be viewed on the New Jersey website, LWVNJ.org, as well as vote411.org. This forum is being live streamed on the Morristown Area League YouTube channel. Our next forum is for the Morristown Council on Wednesday, September 29th at 7 p.m. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator, Joanne Kirk. She is a league-trained moderator who is not from this voting district. Joanne will introduce the candidates and outline the format for this evening.
Joanne, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Donna mentioned, my name is Joanne Kirk. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Burlington County and a resident of Burlington Township, and I'm very pleased to be this evening's moderator. League of Women Voters guidelines for forums are designed to encourage an exchange of ideas on issues. The League has adopted the following format for this evening's discussion. Each candidate will deliver an opening statement of up to 2 minutes in duration in alphabetical order. At the conclusion of opening statements, the candidates in a rotating alphabetical order will be given 1-minute opportunities to respond to audience questions which have been previously submitted. Candidates may request a 30-second rebuttal to any question. During the final segment of the forum, each candidate will deliver a closing statement of up to 1 minute in duration in reverse alphabetical order. A League of Women Voters volunteer is acting as forum timekeeper and will signal when 30 seconds remain and to indicate when that time has elapsed. As I remind all candidates, statements and responses to questions shall remain pertinent to the office and issues. Candidates are asked to maintain an appropriate regard for polite civic dialogue. As a reminder, in this new age of technology, if either candidate does not adhere to this agreement, the moderator reserves the right to make use of the mute option. So now we can move ahead to this evening's program. This year, 2 candidates are seeking election to 1 3-year term on the Chatham Township Committee. They are Catherine Abbott and Mark Lois. 2-minute opening statements will begin with Mrs. Abbott.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy Abbott, the Deputy Mayor, and I'm running for re-election to Chatham Township Committee. Am I supposed to be speaking? Yes? Okay. I have experience in how township government works because of my prior 3 years on the Township Committee, 2 years on the Planning Board, and 9 years on the Environmental Commission. I was a founding member of Chatham Citizens Against Pilgrim Oil Pipeline. I also founded and led the Chatham Safe Routes to School Committee for 7 years and won almost $1 million in sidewalk grants for the township. In addition, I have a long, successful history in PTO leadership. I enjoy working with residents for the good of the town. My slogan is moving forward together. That describes who I am and what I continue to do for our community. My strength is planning. We need to plan for growing stormwater problems. I'm sure you've noticed increased storms and intensity of rainfall. We also need to plan the next round of affordable housing. We want no more surprise building locations and surprise tax increases related to far-right conservative delays and the failure to collect developer fees to create an affordable housing trust fund. We are seeing more dense development in town than in decades. This means an urgency to plan open space conservation. Currently, the open space tax is at the full rate approved by voters. For an average household, this is only $166 per year. My opponent instead wants to cut the open space tax. We need a ready open space fund to act quickly to purchase our remaining green spaces. Planning also includes preventative maintenance. There had been a culture of neglect concerning infrastructure repair amongst far-right administrations. We just finished making long overdue updates to our sewage treatment plant, just in time for Hurricane Ida. We still need to fix the leaks in the roof of the municipal building. The far-right culture of neglect is still being cleaned up by the current Democratic majority. Please re-elect me, Kathy Abbott, to keep us moving forward responsibly.
Thank you. Mr. Lois, you can begin your statement.
Good evening. I'm Mark Lois. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm a Republican, a husband, father, and resident of Chatham Township for over a decade. I'm a graduate of Rensselaer Polytechnic and a small business owner. Our township is beautiful. My wife and I were drawn here because of its small town way of life, safe neighborhoods, and low taxes relative to surrounding towns. I am proud to be part of this township. It's a high quality place to live with exceptional people. Chatham Township is worth the effort to preserve, so I am an active volunteer. I help maintain our public library gardens. I volunteer at the Colony Recreation Center. And this year I became chairman of Colony, our 5-acre municipal pool and tennis club. In January, Colony was in a precarious position to say the least. The club itself had shrinking membership and revenue. Membership collapsed in the 2013-2014 seasons. We had no food concession vendor. Our swim lesson program had no instructors. We had no tennis program. Those were also lost previously. And not one previous committee volunteer, including our mayor at the time, renewed their membership. I worked on recruiting an entirely new volunteer committee. Together, we solved the issues in front of us without more funding. Here's an example of the approach I led. We outsourced our tennis program in a revenue share agreement with the head coach of Fairleigh Dickinson University. This served the membership and brought in money to the township without risking any taxpayer funds. The results are in. Membership almost doubled, revenue nearly tripled, and for the first time in a very long time, the facility is not relying on taxpayers for support. I want to bring this thinking and problem solving to Chatham Township Committee. The current Democrat majority has delivered an almost 20% municipal tax rate increase and a 33% increase in debt in just 2 years. Vote for me is a vote for real results, better results for Chatham Township.
Thank you, Mr. Lois. Now we will move on to previously submitted questions. We would like to thank everyone who submitted questions for this forum. I would just like to note that due to the number of questions that we received, it was sometimes necessary to combine questions. The first question I have for you is, what is your professional and public service experience, and how does it prepare you to be on the committee? And we'll begin with Mrs. Abbott.
My professional experience is that I have been an economist, a teacher, a fundraiser, and now I am working in education and will soon be directing a nonprofit school. My service on the township committee, in government, is that I've served for 1 term on the township committee, have been in the current past few months in a term right now, fulfilling the unfilled term of our outgoing mayor. And I have been on the planning board for 2 full years, and I've worked on the master plan myself, doing a whole element of it called the circulation element. I've worked with the Chatham Safe Routes to School Committee, which did work hand in hand with the township engineer, the administrator, even the DPW. So I am very familiar with where to go to get problems solved in the government, and I am astute with the budget and all things management as well.
Thank you. Mr. Lois?
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, I'm a small business owner. I have been that for 20 years. I have worked with I work with budgets, payroll, capital investment, and because it's a small business, it was my own money at risk. So I know the value of a dollar, and I also know the importance of real results and outcomes. In the township, I'm a volunteer at the library. I maintain the gardens there, but also with my wife and most of the time my children. And but volunteering at Colony Pool, I had to work with the township administration, township volunteers, the pool management, outside vendors, and I had to work on procurement to bring those vendors in. And I had to restart programs that had either been lost in the past or new ideas. And we did all of that without expanded budgets. And we did all of that without making any cuts.
Rebuttal, please. Rebuttal.
Yes, Mrs. Abbott.
I would just like to say that I had experience as a member at Colony Pool for 20 years, and I did as liaison to the township committee when I was on the township committee before. I did work with vendors also to get outside services, such as new services such as yoga, and we also worked with the tennis program an outside vendor to keep it from being a township expense.
A point of order, moderator. That is not a rebuttal. That is an addition to her statement. She did not rebut anything that I said. So I'd like to have
absolutely.
an addition.
Mr. Lois, excuse me. The candidates, as long as they're within the guidelines, they will be allowed to speak.
Okay, I would like a rebuttal then, please.
Excuse me?
I would like a rebuttal, please.
We discussed this before. You get a rebuttal. Like you could rebut the next one. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm not sure. I'll let it go though. Thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Okay. Let's maybe the next question you can get a chance to say what you want to say.
I appreciate
Our
that.
next
Thank you.
question is, if elected, what are your 3 priorities as a township committee member? And Mr. Lois, you will begin this.
Okay, I don't know that I have 3 priorities, but I will give you 3
Okay.
themes. So it's no secret that our tax rate has increased by 20% in 2 years. My opponent herself said on July 7th at a township committee meeting, it's a lot, and it is a lot. So I definitely look to freeze those tax rates, the tax rate increases, to stop that. Another thing I want to do is bring innovative thinking to our committee, because the kind of things that I brought to Colony Pool to take that facility for the first time in a long time off the taxpayers' back, I want to bring those to the rest of the township. And the last thing is results. We need results in our township so we can stop 33% increase in debt in just 2 years. We need results.
Mrs. Abbott.
Okay, my most important goals for the township are preventing overdevelopment through proactive, smart growth planning. And that involves a lot of work with a new master plan to shore up our zoning, and also to create an element for the affordable housing for our next obligation for affordable housing. The second priority is repairing our aging infrastructure, because as I had said earlier, there was a culture of neglect in the past administrations, and we have to budget long-term for these expenses. In addition, the third one is realistic budgeting, and that does not include necessarily flat municipal taxes, but we will try as hard as possible to keep very small increases or no increases, but it has to be realistic to accommodate infrastructure repair and affordable housing that we are supposed to do for our residents.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'd like a rebuttal, please.
Yes, Mr. Lois, you have a rebuttal.
Thank you very much. My opponent mentioned that she was running for re-election. That's actually not fact. What she's actually is right now an appointed unelected official. So she can't run for re-election because she has not been elected by any voters right now. She also mentioned that she wants to move forward together as her slogan. The question though is, in what direction? And I would tell you that when she mentions the master plan, what she really means, and I'll talk about this, is progressive change for our town.
Thank you, Mr. Lois. The next question has to do with taxes. This was submitted in this form. No one likes taxes to go up yet. no one likes getting fewer services. How would you balance these competing interests when developing next year's budget? Please be specific and avoid general statements such as, quote, reduce administrative costs. And we'll begin with Mrs. Abbott.
Okay, so you're saying can you repeat the
I
question?
can read it
about
again. It's a long
taxes. It was a
question.
long question, yeah.
Yes, let me read it again.
Just the first part, please.
No one likes taxes to go up, yet no one likes getting fewer services. How would you balance these competing interests when developing next year's budget? And the questioner would like you to be specific.
Okay, I would like to point out that we did have a rise in the municipal tax rate in 2020 and 2021. And over those 2 years, as my opponent has pointed out in his campaign, it's approximately a 20% municipal tax rate. But the major portion of that, the vast majority, was for employee direct costs. So it would be pretty much impossible to cut personnel at this moment because we are at the bare bones. In fact, we need employees in the Department of Public Works. Certainly, we're not cutting police officers either. So the way we have to try to find revenue and not raise taxes next year is to find shared services, increase shared services, shared equipment with other towns, find more grants, and continue to collect developers' fees for affordable housing and the open space.
Thank you, Ms.
Tax.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lois.
Okay, I will just say this. I've never suggested making cuts to personnel, most importantly, not to public safety. I would absolutely not cut any police officers. And that suggestion from my opponent is an indication of judgment. However, I will say this, at Colony, we made no cuts and made lots of improvements. Right now, we have a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and we're leaking out. And the issue is not to keep pouring in to fill it up, but rather to fix that hole. And fixing that does not require more money. It requires better thinking. And so we have tremendous resources in this town. We need to put those resources to work for our township so that instead of generating bills, they are generating revenue. So we can get to something that looks like tax neutral. So that's what I have to say about the future budget. I would also say that you can't manage what you can't measure. We need better budgeting.
Thank you. The next question has to do with the master plan. Regarding the Chatham Township master plan, what do you think development should look like in the township over the next 10 to 15 years? And we'll begin with Mr. Lois.
Okay, let's be clear about what the master plan is. The master plan is a document that has in it a lot of zoning, but the truth is about the master plan, our roads and boundaries haven't changed. There are some changes to properties on our maps. And so, for instance, Dixie Dale and what's happened at Charlie Brown's, those things have changed. And there does need to be some updating to the master plan, and that's controlled by ordinance. But the master plan, by and large, needs to remain the way that it is. That's the way we preserve our township. I do not want to make a radical overhaul of our master plan. I do not want to bring additional progressive change to our neighborhoods. That's what's happened here already. And we need to stop that. We need to stop taking massive overhauls of documents that have developed over a very long period of time and think that we can make massive changes in a tiny amount of time. That is not a good idea.
Thank you. Mrs. Abbott?
I'd like to say that, yes, we need to control our growth through a very careful master plan, and that involves absolutely not increasing density except where we are mandated to by affordable housing. And unfortunately, we had some problems with planning in the last few years with this this latest round of affordable housing. And we are trying to make sure it's 100% under control and there's no disputes on where it's going. It's well known, it's determined as the best place. But as far as the master plan goes, we are anything but affordable housing. We are not going to increase density. That is not what we should be doing. And Chatham is a beautiful small town with a rural atmosphere. And my aim is to keep it that way. And affordable housing has to fit in appearance and location.
I'd like a rebuttal, please.
Mr. Lois, you can have a rebuttal.
Thank you. I'm very unclear then what my opponent means when she says that she would like to make changes to our master plan to update it. If it is, we are 98% residential. That means that this town is a residential town. I mean, that's what we are. So an update to the master plan to do what? Spot zoning, make changes? I would love to hear that, because it seems in the past I've only heard about additional sidewalks, bike lanes, changes to a circulation plan, and all of that means changes to our town, progressive change.
Thank you.
Can I have a rebuttal too?
No, it's
Okay.
a one rebuttal per question. So,
Right, okay.
okay. But this is has to do with development. So I'll ask you this question for both of you. Do you think Chatham Township is overdeveloped? If so, what would you do to address the problem? And if not, what are your reasons? And we'll begin with Mrs. Abbott.
Well, it depends. It's all a comparison of what's overdeveloped. It's not overdeveloped compared to most of New Jersey at all, especially for a town so close to New York and with a train station. It's uniquely situated next to the Great Swamp, so that makes it automatically green. But also we have worked hard to purchase open spaces, including, for example, the entry to the town by Snake Hill. Or in Green Village now also. So the answer is it's not overdeveloped. I've never seen so much develop in my entire life. I don't enjoy it. And I think that perhaps that at least it's very upsetting to see Dixie-Dale being developed. And I do wish that we had some pedestrian access by the public to what will be called an enclave. So that's what I think that we don't want. We want it to look just like it is. So we want to minimize any impact of any new development. And we should not be trying to push the envelope on any zoning either. For example, the planning board and the board of adjustment should be strict about keeping.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott. Mr. Lois?
Well, if you're like me and my wife, we chose Chatham Township for many reasons, but among them is that it's beautiful. And part of that reason is because we are against the buffer of the Great Swamp. We have great open space, but also because we believe that it's developed appropriately in the way that it is now, and within the zoning that we have. So I'm not looking to make zoning changes. In terms of the overdevelopment in the last few years and what that looks like for this town, that's been forced upon us mostly with affordable housing and a few other things, but that's progressive change. That's a Democrat liberal point of view that's come, and now we all have a front row seat to those policies and to those results for our local township. So if you want to control that, I recommend that you vote for Jack Chittarelli, a Republican, at the top of the ticket, and legislature all the way down.
Thank you, Mr. Lois.
Rebuttal, please.
Yes, Mrs. Abbott, you can have a
Okay.
rebuttal.
As far as state mandates go, we don't control them. We're looking at exactly what we can do in the township. I also would say that as far as overdevelopment, Mr. Lois is a developer and has a variance before the planning board. And I would think that's a precedent-setting planning application for looking to subdivide a lot that's undersized into two undersized lots. I'm all for keeping our zoning the way it is and not granting too many variances.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott.
I'd like to rebuttal.
that was a rebuttal, so we
Okay,
only
I'm
want the
sorry.
question.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. Okay.
I have heard the term affordable housing mentioned a couple of times, so let me ask this question that was submitted. Has Chatham Township met its affordable housing obligations? Please explain your response. And we'll begin with Mr. Lois.
Okay. I'm going to go back to what my opponent just said about subdivision. It's no secret that I have a subdivision that's before the planning board. I have the largest parcel in my zone. I am not a developer. I have never been. I have no professional training in that. I have no accreditation in that. I am a small business owner. I work in a Main Street business, and I always have. I want to preserve the character of my neighborhood. I own the largest lot, which will allow me to build a home that's 2 to 3 times the size of my neighbors' homes. And I don't think that that's appropriate in this town to build a home that's 2 or 3 times bigger than your closest neighboring home. And that's what I have before the planning board. I think it's unethical for my opponent, who is on the planning board, to be discussing planning board matters because she's a member of a jury. That's a quasi-judicial process in place. And for her to mention that is almost disqualifying.
Okay. I'm just going to pause for a minute and remind both candidates that all the questions and responses should remain pertinent to the office and the issues.
Okay.
Okay. And let me repeat the question again. Has Chatham Township met its affordable housing obligations? Please explain your response. Mrs. Abbott?
Chatham Township just completed its the third round of its affordable housing obligations by reaching an agreement with the developer of the Charlie Brown's property to build all residential affordable housing development in our downtown area, so that it is an ideal location, very suitable, and in fact, it is likely to be getting a 9% low-income housing tax credit, which will save Chatham Township residents money in costs that could be passed on to them otherwise in their tax bills. So it has just been completed, and it's in an appropriate location that will be pedestrian friendly for shopping and for reaching recreation. And that's not progressive, that's just good quality of life. Sidewalks and pedestrian access.
Thank you. This is a very specific question. And I'll just read it because I'm not familiar with this problem. Do you think there is a problem with traffic in Chatham Township, such as the corner of River Road and Shunpike and Fairmont and Shunpike? If so, please explain how you would address the problem. And we'll begin with Mrs. Abbott.
Yes, there's definitely a problem with traffic in terms of pedestrian safety. I don't think with cars at the what is it, at Fairmont and Southern Boulevard. That is not one of the ones you mentioned?
The question was the corner of River Road and Shunpike and
River Road.
Fairmont and Shunpike.
I think it's River Road and Southern Boulevard because, yeah, the other one's in the borough, right?
No.
So the River Road is an old rural road, and the traffic light that's at the bottom of Southern and River Road is antiquated. There's a problem with the left turn arrow. It absolutely is due for an upgrade. It's also terrible for pedestrians, and I think that children could walk to school from the River Road condo development if that were fixed. At River Road.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott. Sorry. Mr. Lois?
I guess the question is in general is about traffic. And again, we have a front row seat to progressive change, welcomed by all of this development. And so what you have here is our neighboring town in Chatham Borough, they have 200 more units going in, and near the intersection that was mentioned in this question. So yeah, there's going to be more traffic, and we absolutely have to deal with that. We can do that with traffic studies, but we can also do that in a better way by just simply looking at those intersections pragmatically and addressing them with our own engineer. I would also say that Mrs. Abbott just said that children could walk from River Road by the condos to school. The distance from there to Southern Boulevard, where they would go up Snake Hill in the winter, I mean, it's nearly preposterous. And that hill, that sidewalk is supposed to cost $1 million. $1 million.
Thank you.
Rebut, please.
Mrs. Abbott, you may rebut.
I worked with some children at Lafayette School who were, one was a friend who lived up all the way up towards the high school, and another was in the condominiums. I forget what you call them, but they're by a River Road, the large complex down there. And they were trying to walk to school for fun in nice weather. And yes, older children, definitely. I don't recommend it for Southern Boulevard School, but it's very possible.
Thank you. I have some questions about recreation and playgrounds, so I'll ask the first one. Do you think our playgrounds and fields are adequately maintained? If so, explain your reasons. If not, how would you address the problem? And we'll begin with Mr. Lois.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that our fields and recreation spaces are adequately maintained. Some of the spaces that are not properly maintained are in the school district of the Chathams, under their purview. But in the municipal center, for instance, we have the playground is taped off while they're removing equipment, and then they don't replace the equipment. We have a ball field at the municipal center that is unusable because of the state that they've allowed it to go to. And probably most egregiously, and one that everyone is familiar with, is that Esternay Field, which has playgrounds for tots, children under 5, is regularly barricaded and locked, so you can't get in. So we have public fields that have no public access unless you have a code. That's really unacceptable. I think in our common values, we can recognize that that's not an acceptable condition for our fields and for our facilities.
Thank you. Mrs. Abbott?
I am willing to entertain all citizens' requests to upgrade our recreation fields. It is a matter, of course, of having a tight budget, and totally open to it. I don't think they're in the greatest shape, and we don't have a ton of money, that's for sure. But there's probably things we can do. I am not familiar with the exact things that have been tried lately, and why the equipment is cut off. I think roped off. I thought it had to do with COVID restrictions, but maybe those COVID restrictions have been loosened, and we still haven't taken the allowed access to the play equipment. So that's a serious concern, and I share Mr. Lois's desire to improve it.
Rebuttal, please.
Mr. Lois, you may rebut.
Okay. Yeah, so those restrictions were lifted in 2020, and that was taped off this year. And it's also at the municipal center where you participate, but where my opponent participates regularly in meetings and whatnot. So I would imagine that you would be privy to that information, or at least have observed it. But in addition, the money is very easy to find. It's in the budget right now. I have found it. Our open space fund allows not only for acquisition, but also for maintenance. And for the small amount of money that we would need to take care of these facilities, we could pull it from the open space fund, which the voters passed by referendum that includes.
Thank you, Mr. Lois. This is a follow-up question, so you might both be able to expand on what you've been talking about. The request is evaluate our township's recreational needs and wants, and describe how you would balance them against our existing budget, facility, and personnel limitations. Mrs. Abbott?
I believe I begin this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Mrs. Abbott starts this one.
Okay. Sorry
I have a
about
little
that.
chart, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, there's a need for a new recreation plan and how we work with the borough and the township. This was going to get started, but affordable housing had, I guess, a lot of priority in just getting the township budget set. But the rec fields have had these problems for years under past administrations. I think there's room for Chatham Township and Borough to talk together about field rotation, field maintenance, recreation management. And yes, we always want improvement, but we have a problem with keeping a reasonable budget and burden on the taxpayer. So I absolutely think we should find money where it's findable and open equipment when we can open it. I don't have super exact information, but I'm absolutely for the best possible services we can provide for recreation for our children and for seniors and for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott. Mr. Lewis.
Okay. For any voters that are listening, let me give you some exact information. When I was the chairman, or when I am currently the chairman of Colony Pool, the Colony Pool Committee, we were given a budget. They said in actual dollars, we brought in $100,000 the year before. The budget target for the pool was $140,000. We brought in nearly $290,000. Budgeting like that is never going to work for our township. We need tighter budget to actuals. And we can produce that by getting off of our old system of just simply adding 10% or adding 5% to the year before. That doesn't work. You need to look at this thing at the recreation budget from a better point of view. The other thing about recreation that I would say is that in the open space referendum that was passed by over 70% of voters in this township, there is room for maintenance. You cannot continue to acquire. We have 400 acres and 100 acres are recreation. 400 acres open space, 100 acres recreation. We need some of that open space funds to do maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Mrs. Abbott.
Until this recent rise in the open space tax to the full 2 cents of $100 of assessed valuation, we had money in the open space fund left there by prior administrations only to pay our debt for open space that we already purchased. So if you're talking, the open space fund has not had room for anything but serving debt for properties that we already bought. So if there's something recent, it's a possibility, but
thank you, Mrs. Abbott. Since the topic of open spaces has come up, I'll ask one of those questions. How will you protect our open spaces and the Great Swamp in particular from further development? And we'll begin this one with Mr. Lewis.
Okay, let me just go back quickly because it's also related to open space. My opponent just said that there was no money before this recent increase, but the truth is, if you look at the audit, and I have, if you look at the audit of 2020, at the end of 2020, we had nearly $1 million in the open space fund. Now with the 2 cent, it increased to 2 cents, we will have more. And I support the 2 cents, but we have to use it intelligently. We have to use it in the appropriate way, and that includes maintenance. In terms of how much money we need to acquire land, look at what we're doing to acquire Fenske property. The Fenske property, our open space committee has done an amazing job. We are going to acquire Fenske for almost no money, according to our township administrator, and according to the open space committee, who work with the Trust for Public Lands, they are able to acquire that for very little money. In the past, Republican administrations, they've acquired things like Giralda Farms, the area on Snake Hill, many facilities for almost no money, very little money, certainly not $1 million that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Okay.
Mrs. Abbott.
Okay, I was on the township committee for the unanimous vote to acquire Giralda Farms. I was also there to see at the very beginning when Dixie Dale was coming up as a possible acquisition for the town for open space, that we did not have the funding for it. And that is why it was lost to developers. And there was absolutely some willingness on the part of the owners to discuss it being purchased by open space. And we did not have the money, and that had to do with past Republican administrations, very right-wing Republican administrations, saying they did not want, they made actually a big ceremony out of lowering the open space tax every year. We needed to save our last open spaces, just like Dixie-Dale. People, the constituents have told me how upset they have been about the destruction on River Road. Yes, it will turn into a nice luxury condo development, but it is dense development, and it could have been saved.
Thank you.
Rebuttal, please.
Mr. Lois?
At the time of the acquisition of Geralda and Dixdale, you could have one application in for a grant to acquire one or the other. And Geralda is the clear choice. It's a much larger facility. Second of all, about the density at Dixie-Dale, I mean, the information there is, I don't understand that. 54 units on 30 acres is high density. No one's happy about the progressive change that's coming to our township, but that is driven by policies that start up the chain. And as I said before, I would vote for Jack Chittorelli and the Republicans straight down the line.
Thank you. All right. Another aspect of this that has been asked is, what should we spend to preserve land? And what should our residents pay to fund land preservation in the yearly budget? We'll begin with Mrs. Abbott.
Okay, well, we raised the open space tax to the full 2 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. And I think that should continue for the time being, so that we reimburse ourselves for the money that hasn't been there for a while in the open space fund. And we'll see if we can save money later. But right now, I think we need to have a full open space fund to be ready to purchase other properties that might come up. There would be, even with the Fensky property that you're mentioning, there would be closing costs. There would be costs that could be absolutely paid through by the open space fund, trust fund. So keep it at, it's only $166 for the average household per year at the full 2 cents. It is not a burden to the taxpayers. It's well worth the money per household.
Mr. Lois?
I absolutely support the 2 cent open space fund tax. And my opponent said in our opening that I'm looking to cut it. That's not true. I've never published that anywhere. I've never said that before. So she's willing to make up and say anything that she thinks will give her an advantage. What we shouldn't be doing with open space money is hoodwinking the public. We shouldn't be telling them we're using it to acquire space, or as on the referendum and in the ordinance, that we can maintain space, which we're not doing. We shouldn't be using it to pay down debt. And that's what we've done this year, and that's what the Democrat majority passed in a straight party line vote in the budget. And that is not acceptable, because what that does is it takes something that's enjoyed over a long period of time at historically low interest rates, and it saddles the current taxpayers with something that's enjoyed over a long period of time. And so what's being said right now about filling up a war chest of money is, first of all, it's never been used historically, and it's not appropriate now.
Thank you. Okay. This is on a different topic, the next question. Do you think it makes sense to pursue a merger with Chatham Borough? Why or why not? And we'll begin with Mr. Lois.
You know, we do some things with Chatham Borough. Some things are to our advantage, but absolutely merging the towns together is not a good idea. When I first moved here 10 years ago, I might have said yes. It makes some sense, and the idea of shared services, it makes some sense. When you look at the divergence of our two towns, you look at our fiscal situation, and you look at some of the things that the borough has had to agree with because they're in such poor condition. We've had a Republican majority in our township for a long time. And with that, we've had 0% tax increases over a long period of time, but we've also passed on a surplus year to year, which is the money that goes from year to year that can be used. We've also kept incredibly low debt. Only now we've had a recent explosion where the Democrat majority has taken over, What we have is 33% increase in debt, 20% tax rate increases. It's not for this town. I don't want to see any more of it. I want to preserve Chatham Township. I hope you vote for me, and I hope you vote Republican.
Mrs. Abbott?
Okay, I would never insult the borough. I think they are very well managed and they are a pleasure to work with. But I would say that what Mr. Lois is saying about us being mismanaged by Democrats recently is completely untrue. As I said before, they had to replenish the surplus because it had been too low for what we needed to do with the immediately with employee direct costs. Also, affordable housing mandates passed in 2018 by a Republican and a mayor and township committee. Also, we had structured debt payments that were coming from the past 3 to 5 years, which means they were coming from Republicans. So anything that was related to our recent tax increases, it's all long-term and unavoidable, and it's a correction that for times when there wasn't enough charge, just because people wanted to brag that they had a flat municipal tax instead of doing the responsible thing and paying for exactly what we needed to pay for.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott.
I'd like to rebut, please.
Okay. Mr. Lois, you can rebut.
Okay. My opponent just said that mandates were passed by previous Republican administrations. The affordable housing mandate comes from the state. So it's a misunderstanding of even the structure of government as to where the mandates come from. What is true is that these mandates are passed down by a Democrat governor through Democrat-controlled legislature. And now you see at our township progressive Democrat ideas, and you have a front row seat to those ideas and what they do to suburban life.
Thank you, Mr. Lois.
Rebut, please. I can't, or can I?
That was a rebuttal.
Okay, okay.
Mhm. Sorry. Okay. We have time for maybe one more question. And this is a global and a local question. Okay. Do you have any ideas for what we can do locally to improve our environment? And we'll begin with Mrs. Abbott.
Well, locally, as far as the power of the township committee, I'm very interested in getting the new green stormwater rules passed that were created by the DEP after many, many years of study. And in fact, the township has had some of the leading edge methods of stormwater control for a long time, but now we can codify it in our new master plan and make sure we're doing everything possible. As you saw, even just with the rain today, we're having more rain than we've ever had. The Hurricane Ida taught us that we were lucky. We didn't get flooded like other places, but we did still have, people are noticing more. So we need to actually control our stormwater, but that is with green infrastructure, not with a lot of pipes underground. Okay, we have to do it so that we're letting the carrying capacity of the land dictate how we develop and control stormwater. Otherwise, anything that we can do for impacting climate change, like reducing use of fossil fuels, encouraging our electric charging stations. That was a wonderful thing we just did.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott. Mr. Lois.
When we had the affordable housing mandate, one of the ill-advised spots for it was on River Road. And we discovered then that, and there was a long presentation given by our environmental, by our open space committee rather, and people that were much more educated on this topic. But the River Road Ridge, it's an environmentally sensitive area. It should be protected. I don't know why this hasn't already been protected or why we haven't made motions to do that, but that's something that we absolutely need to do, because it will not only help the environment, but it's also going to help us in the future with obligations. So I will tell you, in my business experience, I have introduced fiber waste recycling, glass recycling, and metal recapture initiatives to factories that I have worked with. And we need to bring things, ideas like that to the township, but also we need to do, to lead our young people by example. So I think, well, my time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Laws. All right, we have come to the time
Rebut-
for,
Can I do a rebut on that, please?
yes, you can.
Okay, the River Road Ridge, that was where the affordable housing was supposed to go, and that Mr. Lois's, some of his supporters, were protesting. That was an ill-advised place to put it, and it absolutely, it had to do a lot with rushing last minute because we did not have planning for affordable housing, and so we were rushing to find a place. It absolutely was far away from a town center. It's a terrible place. On a sensitive ridge is a terrible place. I also think that we should probably retighten our steep slopes ordinance for building on steep slopes. And that was
Thank you.
loosened by the last mayor.
Okay, so it's time for closing statements. They will be 1 minute each, and we'll begin with Mr. Lois.
All right, well, I want to thank the moderators and my opponent for their participation this evening. My opponent and I agree on at least one thing. This local election is about the future of Chatham Township, and you, the voter, will choose. In just 2 years under the current Democrat majority, there's been nearly a 20% rise in the municipal tax rate and a 33% increase in township debt. These are increases that are unsustainable and in the wrong direction. Our small town has been characterized by fiscal efficiency, conservative management. If you're like my family, that's part of what attracted you to Chatham Township. Unfortunately, we're quickly joining the rest of the state and national trends with runaway increases. Look around your neighborhood. Has it improved 20% in the last 2 years? If not, you know we need a new direction and better results for Chatham Township. I am very proud of the results we've achieved at our municipal pool and tennis club this year. This is the type of thinking that we need. For the first time in a long time, the facility is not relying on taxpayers for funding. We didn't do this by cutting offerings, we expanded offerings. We did it without additional spending, without multi-year timelines, without down payment investments of taxpayer money. Progressives like my opponent always make cliche arguments that if you're not raising taxes, you must be cutting something. This is wrong. It's been proven wrong at Colony. It's been proven wrong for 5 years, from 2015 to 2019, if you look at the financials. I want to bring these efficient things to the rest of Chatham Township. If we take new approaches, we can solve our problems. We can generate revenue instead of bills for our residents using our resources. This means reversing the current trends and freezing increases in the municipal tax rate. It also means we improve our quality of life without taking a lifetime to do it. This is my first time running for Chatham Township Committee. I ask you to vote for me, Mark Lois. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mrs. Abbott?
In my closing statement, I want to insert something, which is the amount of the 20% increase over 2 years for a home where you would normally pay $20,000 in taxes. It is not 20% on your full $20,000 per year. That would be $4,000. It is 20% of the municipal portion of your tax bill, which would, of the municipal portion, which is only 17% of your total tax bill. If you pay $20,000, that percent for municipal services, police, and everything that you get, recreation, everything, is $3,400 to the township. That is not enormous, just so you understand. That's why people weren't crying and complaining to the township, because it was $3,400 over. That's what you would pay. And if you take the increase that you got over 2 years, you would be adding $680 over 2 years for the 20%. I'm not saying 20% is good. It's just that 20% isn't as large as, and it's a disproportionate view of what's happening and misleading and disingenuous. So, and it was necessary. The reason that tax increase was necessary was for personnel costs in the last 2 years going up. And next, it was for affordable housing, which was committed to in 2018 by Mayor Kurt Ritter and the Republican majority then. And affordable housing to taxpayers was increased the cost because they did not collect developers' fees. And that is a stream of revenue that is allowed and should have been collected if a plan had been in place. That was a big mistake and a big loss to taxpayers. So what proud homeowner in Chatham would neglect needed preventative maintenance also in our town, with our leaky municipal building roof, all for the sake of these saying you're having zero tax increase.
Thank you,
for
Mrs.
municipal-
Abbott.
Please reelect me.
Now I would like to thank the candidates, the timer, the league volunteers for this evening. Thank you to the audience for attending and for being active participants in the democratic process. Remember to make your vote count and vote in the election. We want to remind voters there are 3 ways to vote in the upcoming general election. You can vote by mail. Registered voters can apply for a vote by mail ballot by following the instructions found at vote.nj.gov or contacting your county clerk. Remember, vote by mail ballots cannot be returned to an early voting location or at any polling place for this election. The second way is in-person early voting. This new option enables all registered voters to cast their ballot in person using a voting machine during a 9-day period prior to Election Day. You can now choose to vote in person when it's most convenient for your schedule. In-person early voting locations will be open Saturday, October 23rd through Sunday, October 31st. Hours will be Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., no appointment necessary. The third way to vote is at your polling place on Election Day. Vote in person from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day, November 2nd. This forum is available for viewing on the LWV Morristown area YouTube channel. We encourage you to share the link, but remind you that the recording can only be shared in its entirety and may not be used in campaign materials, literature, or advertising of any kind. I want to thank you all again and hope you enjoy your evening. Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.